Welcome the chosen ones. Be cautious who you dig a grave for, since life has a strange way of distributing shovels to the wrong people. There is a spiritual law. Nobody discusses it. Those who attempt to destroy the divine often self-destruct. It isn't karma, it's cosmic retribution. And right now, it's humiliating your foes in ways they never expected. You see, when they came for you, they weren't just chatting. They were initiating a full-scale slander campaign. Public deception, private sabotage, low-level witchcraft, and even staged tears for pity. However, there is a plot twist. You did not break. You blossomed. And now they're pressed as hard as a dollar suit at a Lagos dry cleaner. This is the insane part. According to psychological research, individuals often strive to destroy others who unconsciously remind them of their own lost potential. You were not the enemy. You were the evidence. And the pressure they're under right now, that is their own shadow, smothering them. They attempted to cancel. You bury you and replace you. But what they didn't comprehend was that you can't murder what is protected by the divine. So brace up, because in this video, we'll reveal the actual reason they're so uncomfortable with your presence, as well as why those who attempted to destroy you are now silently dissolving under the weight of their own lie. Let's get to it. Number 1, they did not intend to destroy you. They wanted to inherit your authority without paying the price. They didn't just want to pull you down. They wanted to become you without going through the process that created you. That's the bit no one speaks about. These folks were not out to ruin you for pleasure. They were privately preoccupied with your power, strength, and presence. Instead of recognizing what it needed to convey that energy, they attempted to hijack it. They wanted your brightness without your darkness, blessings, fights, knowledge, or scars. You possessed something they couldn't duplicate, no matter how hard they tried. And that drove them insane. They imitated your style, stole your phrases, and duplicated your movements. But they were unable to replicate your effect because they failed to see that your power did not emanate from the surface. It sprang from all you experienced and overcame in quiet. It stemmed from weeping yourself to sleep and waking up as if nothing had occurred. It sprang from betrayal, rejection, and a continued commitment to love. That is the kind of power you cannot fake, no matter how many masks you wear. They believed that by assaulting you, they might somehow absorb your glow, and that if they diminished your light, theirs would shine brighter. But life does not operate that way. They fell into the same trap they had laid for you. They poisoned their own spirit in an attempt to control yours. They believed they were playing chess, but they were really pawns in a game they didn't even comprehend. You weren't just a target. You were a test. And they failed. Misery exploded. You were brought into their lives as a mirror, a gift, and perhaps a bridge to their own development. Instead of respecting you, they envied you. Rather than learn from you, they attempted to remove you. And in doing so, they set off repercussions that they can no longer avoid. They did not just sever a relationship, friendship, or connection. They damaged themselves by attempting to destroy someone they couldn't spiritually reach. You're still rising, blazing, and developing. And they're trapped, repeating every step, wondering how it all went wrong. They didn't comprehend this. You were not only picked, you were protected. And assaulting someone who is safe is the quickest way to kill oneself. Number 2, they started a war. They were not spiritually prepared to battle. They came for you as if it were a game, laughing, taunting, and plotting behind your back, as if there would be no repercussions. They misjudged you because you did not seem scary. You did not fight dirty. You did not respond publicly or reveal their dirt. They believed you were weak. However, they did not comprehend. You were working at a whole other level. They brought combat to a hallowed area. They had no spiritual qualifications to be there. This wasn't simply a little quarrel or a personal grudge. This was spiritual battle. And they came in as amateurs, believing they could win by gossip, manipulation, and phony relationships. But what they didn't realize was that your strength was not based on noise. It was supported by divine alignment. You didn't respond because you were protected. You weren't retaliating since your quiet was not motivated by fear. It was a strategy. You were letting the higher realm handle it while they continued to dig their own graves. They believed they were in charge. They believed they had control over your reputation, tranquility, and future. but they were playing with energies that they couldn't even comprehend. They drew chaos into their own lives by pursuing someone who had been sent to break generational curses. You were not at their level, not because you were superior, but because you were picked for a mission much beyond their comprehension. They didn't just misinterpret you. They misjudged the whole battlefield. They assumed it was simply shadow and drama. But they were up against someone who had passed through fire and emerged polished. Someone who understands how to endure in quiet, heal without adulation, and climb without resentment. And now the energy they give forth is returning like a boomerang. They are unable to avoid. They awoke to spiritual implications. They were not designed to survive. Every scheme, gossip, and phony smile was a seed they sowed in cursed ground. And now their lives are demonstrating it. They attempted to curse someone who was already covered. When you're covered, anybody who tosses dirt chokes on it. They believed they could ruin you. However, in doing so, they revealed that they were never strong enough to stand by you in the first place. Number 3, they never competed with you. They were competing against the version of you that they could never be. They were not competing with you. They were competing against the version of you that they could never be. They understood this deep within. That's what had them so stressed. You were a continual reminder of everything. They claimed to be something they were not. You provoked their fears just by existing. They saw how you conducted yourself without pretending, how you entered rooms without shrinking, how you recovered from situations that would have broken most individuals. And instead of being motivated, they became resentful. They studied. You said that you followed your every move, not out of hatred, but out of annoyance that your light revealed how weak theirs was. You became the unsaid benchmark that they couldn't reach. And since they couldn't be you, they attempted to destroy you. They believed that if they tarnished your reputation, criticized your progress, or made others doubt your character, they would feel better about their own lack of advancement. But it did not work. The more they attempted to bring you down, the more people realized why they were so captivated with you in the first place. They wanted to persuade people that you weren't all that. But the truth kept pouring out in your presence, spoke louder than their chatter. Your findings debunked their rumors. They expected people to select sides. Instead, people began to see the distinction between someone who develops and someone who acts. You didn't have to explain yourself since your constancy was the proof. You didn't seek to be the standard, yet you became one nonetheless. And that's what hurts the most. You've never played dirty. You've never competed for attention. You just kept developing. And as you matured, you reminded them of everything they weren't accomplishing in their own lives. That is the true reason they couldn't tolerate you. You proved that healing is possible, that resilience is genuine, that grace is strong. They couldn't fake it for long enough to compete with that. So they opted for the next best thing, attempting to harm the one person who made them feel like a phony. But it just confirmed what everyone else had already found out. You were never a competitor. You were their exposure. Number 4, your development became a silent condemnation of their whole personality. They couldn't take your progress since it made their whole persona seem false. You did not proclaim your recovery. You did not reveal your development. You simply kept coming up differently, calmer, smarter, and more grounded. And that silent metamorphosis moved them more than any argument could. Why? Because it pushed them to confront the reality. Everything they said about you, every lie they said, every fabricated image of you, they attempted to sell to others. Everything fell apart the minute you evolved beyond who they portrayed you to be. They were counting on you remaining broken. That's what their whole tale hinged on. They needed you in misery so that their treachery would seem justifiable. They wanted you to respond so their manipulation could make sense. Instead of providing them the mayhem they desired, you offered them stillness, development, and tranquility. You were a living contradiction to every false claim they had made about you. And what made everything worse was that you never sought vengeance. You didn't attempt to ruin them again. You did not toss dirt. You let your metamorphosis to speak for itself. And that's how they were exposed. Because, even as you grew out of the drama, they were still attempting to control a version of you that no longer existed. They were battling a ghost while you were creating your future, your radiance, growth, and resilience. It transformed into a mirror, not just for them, but for everyone who was watching. People soon began asking questions. Why does the person who was reportedly insane, poisonous, or deceptive seem so well? Why is it that the one who has been assaulted the most is the only one thriving? That change in view had a significant impact on them, since it called into question their own identity. You didn't just endure their hatred. You outgrown it. And that alone demonstrated that their stories were not true. These were predictions. Your promotion has now become a subtle reminder of their fears. Your bid is their punishment. Your brightness is the spotlight they never desired. And your success, that is the ultimate nail in the coffin of all lies. They based their image on. Number 5. They believed you were an easy target, but you were a test from the cosmos. They assumed you were soft. They assumed you were naive. Easy to play, easy to deceive, and easy to injure. You were quiet, meek, and maybe too forgiving in their view. And here is where they made their worst error. They felt that your forbearance indicated weakness. They observed your goodwill and assumed that meant you might be used. But they didn't know you weren't a victim. You were a test one sent by the universe, and they stepped right in. People don't comprehend that even the most ordinary-looking individual in the room may hold supernatural weight. You did not come into their lives by chance. You were put there to see what they would do with someone pure, genuine, and who arrived with good intentions, but they failed. Not because you misled them, but because they revealed themselves. They believed they were just using you, whispering behind your back, taking from your soul, and laughing at your fragility. But each time they harmed you, they created their own repercussions. Because when the universe puts someone special into your life, how you treat them becomes your own report card. And now, karma is paying those checks slowly, openly, and without notice. The same items they attempted to break into. You're showing up broken in their own lives. Their tranquility is gone. Their masks are slipping. Their authority is disintegrating beneath the weight of the games they have played. And the greatest part? They did it all to themselves. Because you did not fight back. You did not need to. Your responsibility was not to respond. It was a revelation. And by just standing in your truth, you become a mirror. They were unable to flee. Every nasty act they committed in secret is now following them like a shadow in public. They assumed you'd be the one left looking insane, shattered, and vulnerable. Instead, they became the proof. They didn't just aim to destroy you. They transformed you into a magnificent receipt. A live reminder that when people abuse those given to bless them, they lose more than just the individual. They lose their cover. And the fall strikes harder. When the ego was inflated. Number 6. They transformed their platforms into shrines bearing your name. They were so preoccupied with destroying you that they unwittingly made you famous in places where you had never even entered your name, living rent-free in their tongues. Group discussions and remarks, whether coded or not. They were so focused on tarnishing your reputation that they didn't understand they were boosting your presence. You did not need to market yourself. They did it for you. Behind closed doors at brunches, on burner accounts, and subliminal postings, they maintained your name in the press like it was trending. But it was not hatred. It was preoccupation masquerading as fury. The fact is that you made them feel emotions they were not willing to confess. Jealousy, insecurity, and impotence. So they converted their platforms, whether public or private, into shrines to bring you down, believing that if they could make people question you, they'd feel less little. But the reverse occurred. The more they spoke, the more others wondered who this person was that they were so enamored with. Why do they keep coming back to this name? Curiosity developed into awareness. They unknowingly provided you with visibility. They created a tension in your life that you had not asked for, but were willing to deal with. What they didn't anticipate was how taxing it would be. Keeping an eye on you, twisting every action, and silently observing every post you make. Your radiance triggered them. Your work upset them, as did your silence. That was the loudest of all, because, no matter how hard they pushed, you never gave them the breakdown they were looking for. That is what bothers them today. You never responded. You simply continued shining and blossoming as others crumbled under the weight of their own devotion. The venues they used to malign you are now evidence of how profoundly you influenced them. They attempted to bury your name with talk, but ended up creating a mythology around it. and the stillness that they criticized you for became your strength, while they became the loudest reminder of their own suffering. You were the echo that they couldn't escape, not because you pushed it, but because they couldn't stop feeding it. They assumed you'd win easily since you didn't have a crowd to support you. No, make a backup. There is no clique and no noisy defense team. You did not clap back. You did not reveal receipts. You did not indulge in drama. And to them, it looked like weakness, like someone they could control, manipulate, or even kill. However, they failed to consider what they couldn't see. Who was providing spiritual support for you? You were not loud because you didn't have to be. You weren't moving in fear because you were protected by something much greater than them. Number 7, they didn't just misjudge you. They underestimated who was supporting you. They misjudged you on the surface and utterly overlooked the supernatural architecture that kept you together below while they counted allies. Alignment protected you while they formed gossip rings. You were shielded by hidden powers. Each time they attempted to embarrass you, they revealed themselves. Every trap they laid became a snare for their own feet. Not because you fought back, but because you were forbidden in a world they did not even believe in. They ridiculed your quiet, laughed at your solitude, and assumed your silence equaled defeat. But they couldn't see your spiritual armor, the ancestors, angels, and divine wisdom that protected you from what should have killed you. They didn't just misjudge you. They misjudged the laws. They were breaching global rules, spiritual protection that does not appear immediately, but always appears when it is needed. Now they're perplexed. Things in their lives are falling apart for no apparent cause. Plans are failing. Relationships are ending. There is no more peace. They are humbled by the unseen repercussions. They cannot track back since the effects are divine. No amount of false prayers, sage burning, or social spin can undo it. You were not alone. You were concealed, and they made the error of going to fight with someone who was spiritually protected. Now they're learning the hard way. When you attack a specific individual, it is not just personal, but also spiritual. And when the divine replies, there is no appeal. Number 8, their lives stopped while yours grew. They believed that monitoring you would give them power, but it only served to freeze their own life. They paused their mission just to monitor yours while you were mending, growing, learning, and rising. They were busy checking your profile, chanting your name in places you'd never entered, and practicing falsehoods for people who didn't care. They became spectators in their own lives since your tale was the only one that made them feel anything. They want your success so much that they stopped making progress in their own path. Their hate has become their home. Their jealousy became their anchor. Every time you made a step forward, they halted their lives to reflect. However, they failed to see that your regularity was not for show. It was about survival. It was about discipline. It was a silent spiritual fight. And while they were playing checkers with your name, you were constructing castles out of agony. Its devotion became its own prison. You progressed ahead, but others remained caught in a loop. Same talks, drama, and resentment. They lost time. They will never come back, attempting to rewrite your tale when they should have been creating their own. But that's the point. They lacked vision for themselves. They had a vengeance against you. And now you've grown to areas they can't reach. Not because you are better, but because you have moved. You kept going even though it ached. You continued to come up when it was lonely. You continued to develop even while no one applauded. And now your life reflects this. The tranquility you feel, the radiance you exude, the people you attract. It's all the result of the inner work you completed while they were watching and wishing they had put everything in your demise and received no return. Meanwhile, your tiniest progress wrecked their grandest plans. Each level you reached revealed how far behind they really are. And the worst part? They did this upon themselves. You didn't need to destroy them. They self-sabotage in an attempt to sabotage you. Number 9, they did not anticipate you to survive their life. They were counting on your quiet. This means guilt. They believed that if they heaped enough dirt on your name, it would bury you. If they spoke it loudly, long enough, and to enough people, the lie would become true. This was their whole approach. Destroy your credibility before you can step into your calling. They imagined your name would not survive the storm they created. But what they didn't expect was your perseverance. You did not fight fire with fire. Time will tell. So did time. They didn't understand you were patient. And that patience allowed your truth to emerge while others tried to dominate the story. You took a step back and concentrated on what was important: healing, developing, and walking in harmony. They had followers, group conversations, and fabricated support. But you had the truth. And truth does not perish. It does not panic. It waits, and that waiting was your most effective weapon. You knew something that others didn't. False tales age poorly, particularly when the person at the heart of them continues to rise in integrity. You did not need to defend yourself. Your change became proof. Every falsehood they uttered started to unravel while your character remained steady. Every hyperbole began to seem absurd as your actions stayed grounded and steady. Their narrative weakened, your influence grew, and the world started to wake up. What's killing them now is that you've survived the pandemonium. You didn't just withstand the defamation. You've turned it into a stage. People who formerly believed the chatter are now seeing your fruit. Your life proves they were mistaken. You are evidence that they were desperate. And this understanding haunts them since they formed their identity on being correct about you. They attempted to murder your character, but all they accomplished was speeding up your rebirth. And now the same people who dragged your name are seeing you ascend in places they can't get to, supported by people they can't influence, and lifted by a reality they can't erase. You didn't just outlive the falsehood. You made it unimportant. Number 10. They examined you like a blueprint, but forgot. Blueprints need the original architect. They believed that if they emulated your style, tone, and habits, they would get your authority. They studied your language, mimicked your energy, and replicated your presence, watching every move you made like a teacher. They didn't realize, however, that your power was not derived from your actions. It is ingrained in your personality. That's the one thing they couldn't falsify. You did not become who you are by imitation. You passed through flames. You confronted the darkness, sacrificed in quiet, prayed through suffering, and followed a greater calling even when it didn't make sense. That's what created your blueprint. It was not designed for aesthetics. It was sculpted by spiritual obedience. You aligned and submitted, and that alignment imbued everything you touched with substance. So when they attempted to clone your outcomes without following your path, it flopped. They looked the part, but the enthusiasm was lacking. They said the words, but they carried no weight. People sensed the hollowness. The repetition was there, but the essence was gone. It's simple to wear someone's jacket, but it won't keep you warm if you don't carry their fire. They assumed power was in the packing, but it is really in the frequency. The frequency you carry cannot be taken. It cannot be practiced. It has to be earned. They didn't comprehend your radiance stemmed from alignment, not attention, perfect timing, or current issues. They imitated your gait, but were unable to live in the woods. They imitated your brightness, but couldn't match your shadow work. Now they're exhausted from trying to keep up with a position that was never theirs. They've adopted your mannerisms, vocabulary, and techniques. But none of it is working because whatever they say sounds empty. Every time they appear, it seems contrived. They pursued the picture but missed its origin. You weren't just a blueprint. You were the architect. And plans do not construct themselves. Everything crumbles in the absence of the foundation, challenges, and spiritual teaching. That's why they're exhausted, perplexed, and continually observing you from afar. They examined the recipe but overlooked the key component: purpose. And it is something you cannot fake, steal, or borrow. A number. They projected their self-hatred onto you, and they can't get away from the mirror. They didn't despise you because you'd done anything bad. They disliked you because you accomplished something genuine. You did not wear a mask. You did not ask for approval. You did not shrink to make others feel bigger. You came out with your truth, honestly and unapologetically. And that's how they were exposed. You didn't have to point out their vulnerabilities. Your mere presence made them feel something. Instead of confronting their underlying hurts, they made you the villain. But the reality is, they didn't see you clearly. They were staring at their own reflections and mistaking them for your persona. You were the mirror, not the monster. You exposed a fact they were not prepared to face. Your development revealed their stagnation. Your confidence prompted their self-doubt. Your mending revealed how much they still bled. And that's when the projection started. They blamed you for what they lacked. They presented you as haughty when you were really confident and cold. When you were merely guarded, false, and developing outside of their comfort zone. It was simpler for them to distort your image than to confess they were unhappy with theirs. So they created a version of you that suited their shame story. But here is where the tables flipped as you continued to rise. People began to notice the disparity. You were not bitter. You were not vindictive. You weren't even chatting about them. You were focused, shining, and constant. And all of their falsehoods began to lose traction because nothing they said could compete with what you demonstrated. That's when the mirror effect kicked in. With no one to blame, they were forced to confront themselves. Every slur they've hurled has now come full circle, not to punish, but to expose that they are plagued by the identical narratives they attempted to lock you into. Not because you cursed them, but because truth always prevails. You were not their issue. You were their mirror. And the more they battled to alter your image, the more they damaged their own identity. You did not ruin them. They were already disintegrating. You were just the light that made it apparent. A number. They sought to destroy you, not understanding you were their only path to success. They didn't just reject you. They refused the spiritual assistance that came through you. You weren't simply another individual going through their lives. You were a lifeline, a link, and a divine appointment. You were meant to be a godsend, to open doors and breathe life into areas people had given up on. Instead of acknowledging the task, they reacted with opposition, pride, and treachery. They perceived your humility for weakness, your support for the competition. Your presence is a threat. They couldn't comprehend why someone would walk up in their lives without a plan. That level of genuineness shook them. They didn't know how to accept mercy without attempting to control it. Because they couldn't manage you, they decided to crucify you. Gossip became their defense. Lies were their cover. They sabotaged the object that was supposed to bless them. You were the bridge, and they burnt it, believing they would never have to cross it again. But they didn't understand you were their test. The way they handled you would decide the level of access they received. You were not searching for worship. You were not even searching for recognition. You were only carrying out your assigned duties. They spit on the truth, compassion, and commitment you brought with you. Now the bridge they demolished is gone, and they're trapped in the cycle you were supposed to assist them escape. The chances are gone, as is the favor. The brightness that you brought. Gone. You did not close the door. They did. What saddens them now is that they can't reopen it since grace has relocated. You've risen, and the access they once took for granted is no longer accessible. They are now sitting on the other side of a door. They slammed closed, thinking they had handled you better. And that remorse isn't because they've finally seen your value. It's because they've realized you were the only true one they'd ever had. That type of connection does not happen very often. You were the bridge to their breakthrough, but they squandered it. A number. They couldn't take the fact that you were picked, so they attempted to portray you as cursed. They couldn't understand you, so they attempted to redefine you. You did not seem damaged enough for them to feel superior. You did not remain down long enough to make them feel protected, and you did not ask for their approval, so they were worried. To them, someone like you, unconcerned, unshaken, and profoundly anchored, had to be a danger. So, rather of dealing with their own insecurities, they distorted your image into something dark, unstable, or strange. They began with subtle barbs, backhanded compliments, and hearsay that caused people to question you before they ever met you. The situation then escalated. They described your strength as pride. Your judgment is paranoid. Your seclusion is hubris, and your blessings are luck, or worse, manipulation. They twisted the script and framed you as cursed because they couldn't believe someone like you could be labeled that. What they didn't comprehend was that calling involves confrontation. You never tried to prove anything. You were merely going through a light. They were unprepared to face it. That light revealed every lie they'd ever told themselves about who they were. You didn't have to say anything. Simply being you was enough to cause disruption. Your very presence made them squirm. So they attempted to dominate the story. They sought to persuade others, and maybe themselves, that you were the issue. But here's a twist. The more they chatted, the more they shared. The more they planned, the more they unraveled. And now everything they've said about you is coming back to haunt them. They are the ones being exposed. They're the ones becoming paranoid. They are the ones who are squeezed and trapped in cycles that you have broken free from. The difference was that you never had to toss dirt to shine. You did not modify age stories. You have outlived them. And now the truth is coming out without you having to do anything. The same people who derided your method are now confused as you stroll in harmony. They couldn't take you being selected, so they sought to paint you as forced. However, they condemned themselves with bitterness. And you simply kept climbing. A number. Your presence became evidence that spiritual wealth exists. They believed that the true riches was in prestige, loudness, and attention. They assessed achievement based on clout rather than character. So you choose a gentler route, one that preserved your tranquility, vitality, and demanded recovery. They laughed. They assumed you were playing tiny. They couldn't notice that you were playing divine when they were looking for validation. You sat still, reconstructing your soul. And the soul work. It became your treasure. They couldn't understand why you weren't bothered by their drama. Why didn't you respond to their shade? Why didn't you compete or strive to prove something? It caused confusion in their universe. Silence represents vulnerability. Yours, however, was based on strategy. You were not broke. You were being constructed. You were not silent. You were being called. And now, everything they derided has become exactly what they wished for. They broke, not simply financially, but also in terms of significance. Their relationships are superficial. Their pleasure is contrived. Their identity is based on looks that no longer please them. They have followers, but not peace. They applaud, but do not relax. They remained in the same location, performing roles and pursuing significance, while you rose not in status, but in spirit. The effects are obvious today. You have depth, insight, and actual alignment. You enter rooms having nothing to prove and everything to give. You don't have to dominate the place. You are the space. Your presence carries weight because your soul is full. You bring tranquility that money cannot buy and clarity that fame cannot create. You stroll with something genuine. And that truth is exposing the emptiness they've worked so hard to conceal. They attempted to ruin you in the hopes of gaining an advantage. But you were never in a competition. You were on purpose. While they plotted your ruin, you accumulated spiritual money, resilience, knowledge, patience, and protection. They misjudged you since your riches was not obvious. But now it is loud and has consequences. Your soul remained intact. Your soul remained pure. And now they're struggling for their identities. In a world that no longer accepts their masquerade. You were wealthy all along. They just lacked the necessary vision. They attempted to alter your tale, but the truth revealed itself in gold writing. They misjudged your strength, insulted your development, distorted your name, and spread falsehoods to the very people God was about to bless through you. However, in their attempts to bring you down, they provided you with a platform from which they attempted to delete you. They emphasized you in an attempt to break you. They corroborated what the divine had previously known. You were picked on purpose, not because you were popular. Your radiance did not come from applause. It resulted from alignment. And today, that alignment is evident. You did not argue. You ascended. You did not clap back. You went onward. And now, everything they used to define you has become evidence of how far you've come and how far they've fallen into their own trap. Their fixation exposed your strength. Their silence validated your influence. Their fall became your confirmation. What was once meant to disgrace you is now your crown. And what they believed would condemn you turned out to be God's way of setting you apart. You didn't just survive. You changed. You became the mirror, template, lesson, and evidence. All in one. And now they're left watching you enjoy the life they said you didn't deserve. Let this be a reminder. Not everyone who travels with you agrees with you. And sometimes their rejection becomes your redirection. You were never intended to be understood by the crowd. You were designed to rock the room merely by being in reality. And the truth cannot be corrupted, stolen, or silenced. So let them chat. Let them watch. Allow them to repeat every untruth. Because the more they attempt to study you, the more it becomes clear that they lack power. You've already won, and everyone knows it. If this message resonated to your spirit and provided you with clarity or validation you didn't realize you needed, don't simply scroll away. Subscribe to the channel now. There will be more truth, healing, and strength coming your way. Hit the like button to show the algorithm that genuine, honest, and spiritual material is still important. Comment below and tell us which portion struck you the hardest. We want to hear your truth, too. And do not keep this to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that heavenly favor cannot be fabricated and purpose cannot be destroyed. This is more than just a channel. It is a movement. And if you're a part of it, let the world know you're together, safe, and chosen. God bless you.